Hey, what's going on? We're back. It's Goal-Oriented Season 2, Episode 3. I'm your host, Austin Curtright. I'm joined by Colton Sulley to my left and Mason Young to my right. Guys, we just got back from Nebraska this weekend. How was it?
Yeah, we had a good time. I mean, we stayed in an Airbnb, probably about 10 or 15 minutes off of campus. Played some NCAA football on the tiny TV in our living room, and just had a good time checking out the scene in Lincoln, seeing what all the different restaurants and stuff was like and what historic downtown was like.
Yeah, I thought the downtown was really nice. Me and Colin had been there before, and I didn't realize it was going to be that nice. So we hit up some nice restaurants thanks to Mason, who found those. They were pretty fire. So I also got to beat Mason in NCAA again, so that was pretty fun.
You didn't, though.
Well, I went undefeated, and I beat
That's
Colton
true.
on a last-minute 30-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
As time expired when Brendan Presley went through a player's arms.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, whatever.
NCAA is funny that way. What was also, I thought, really funny was some of the decor and things we had in our Airbnb. If you guys want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Couple eccentric weapons in Mason's room.
Just had knives on the wall.
It
It's
was
like, okay,
just-
this is cool.
If to dial it up, I mean, our Airbnb was great. I'm glad that we had it for the
Yeah,
nights
it was
we did.
really
But
really good.
the two main themes of our Airbnb house was weapons and bald eagles and Alaska. So 3 words. But that sums up everything you need to know about where we stayed. But it was great. Nice part. Like they said, we got to check out downtown Lincoln. There's obviously tons of people for the big game. And then, guys, I mean, we went to Memorial Stadium. None of us have ever been there. Just what was that experience like going into that, and especially what we saw on Saturday?
Coolest atmosphere in college football that I've experienced so far. And obviously that list isn't super broad yet as I continue in my career out, and you guys continue your careers as well. I mean, I would think we'll see some more stuff, but pregame they're playing Mo Bamba. We're down on the field, the stadium's shaking, the crowd's rocking, and then they all disappeared after halftime.
I was kind of surprised at the amount of people that were there. I mean, I know it's OU Nebraska. I know it's big noon, but Nebraska's not good, and they sold that stadium out. It was really loud in the first quarter, like really loud. But then obviously OU shut that down pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, just to start, OU gets the quickly punts first possession of the game, and you're like, okay, here we go again. The crowd's rocking, everyone's into it. And, Mickey Joseph comes out for his first game as their interim coach, and student section's chanting his name. The whole crowd is getting rowdy for him, and then Nebraska comes out with a super easy touchdown drive. And at that point, you're really feeling like this is about to be a barn burner, or this is about to be a really close game given, the crowd advantages that Nebraska had. And then all of a sudden, what did OU do? Dylan Gabriel, 61-yard touchdown run, shuts it up. What happened from then?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan, obviously that run was huge for the momentum. Eric Gray had a nice run where he made a really nice move. They found Marvin Mims a couple times. Theo East got his first touchdown of the season. But, all the players post-game were like, it was super loud in the first quarter, and then it wasn't.
Yeah, definitely, and a couple other players that really factored into that game that helped quiet some of the noise. Jalil Farouk getting his first career touchdown. That was good to see from him. Jiren Canax and Key Lawrence on defense both really stepped up. Canax forced a fumble and then recovered it, and Key Lawrence had an interception, and those were big plays. In fact, the Canax fumble recovery was what led to OU scoring on the first drive of the second half and really kind of putting Nebraska away at that point. So it was really good to see another good game on tape of OU playing solid defense, and it looked like the offense came a long way this week as well.
And the reason that Jiren Canax got his opportunity right was because Deshaun White, who was playing Cheetah, obviously had that targeting penalty in the second quarter. Yeah, second quarter there. Jiren ended up leading the team in tackles that game, and obviously, like you said, had the forced fumble. And he played really well, but it was sort of interesting to hear Brent Venables talk after the game, being like, yeah, he made some plays, but realistically, he still doesn't know what he's doing out there. So obviously that speaks a lot to what his ceiling is. Jiren Canax obviously been talked about as a guy with a lot of buzz, and he really showed out in that vein on Saturday.
Yeah, his ceiling is through the roof, and he's a really talented guy. I wrote a story about him post game. Brent was able to get him from Clemson to Norman, and they're both from Kansas. They both played linebacker. They're really kind of similar dudes, and yeah, Jiren Canax, I can't wait to see what he does in year 2, year 3. He's just going to be a really good player. But, guys, enough about Nebraska. We got Kansas State coming up this weekend, big game. Brent Venables playing his old team. What stood out to you about Brent's press conference today?
I think it's kind of a tale of two sentiments with Brent Venables. It was interesting to hear him say, he basically was just like, I really don't care that we're playing K-State this week. There's not really a nostalgia component for me anymore because I've coached against them so many times. And yeah, he understands what people are saying. This is his first time coaching against them as head coach, but there's just really not that nostalgia component that you think that might be there. And he's just, part of that is just he's so laser focused that he doesn't care who the opponent is. He's just trying to get this team ready to go win a football game. But at the same time, as he continued to open up in the course of that press conference, he did reflect a lot on how Kansas State has shaped him as a coach, with him getting his start there, being a player there, then being a GA there, then being the linebackers coach there before coming to Oklahoma for his first stint. And so it was intriguing to hear all that, but that razor focus that makes him kind of maybe, in a sense, block out some of the K-State noise and kind of the aura surrounding his origins, that focus is something that he honed at K-State. So it's something that comes with it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like you said, that definitely is a valid point. I think Brent's just not really ever been the sort of guy to really sit back and reflect on a lot of those things. I mean, Kansas State obviously means a lot to him because he started there, but he's to the point in his career where he doesn't necessarily really care that much. He's at Oklahoma now. It's half the reason why he left Clemson. He's cares about Clemson while he's there. He's not coaching OU while he's there. So I think it's really just he's kind of a tunnel vision person when it comes to football, because what means most is the players that he's coaching at the time and winning games at that time. So as we got talking about it, obviously he mentioned, some of his stories with Bill Snyder and being excited he's not coaching against him on Saturday. But other than that, I mean, it's sort of what we thought we'd get with Brandon. It's sort of similar to what he said about the future of Bedlam today. He was asked about that, and he said, what did he say, guys?
Yeah, I mean, Brett McMurphy's report this morning with statements from both ADs from Oklahoma and from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, saying that Bedlam's over, and Brent Venables was asked about it today, and he wasn't even aware of that report. So that just speaks to the kind of guy Brent Venables is. He doesn't really listen to the noise. He's more focused on his program inside the walls. And then, I thought it was pretty funny when he was talking about Bill Snyder. I think he sent him a text or something and said, congrats on the Nebraska win. Hope you get number 4. And then came back an hour later after he checked the schedule and was like, except for this week. So, but Brent Venables takes a lot from Bill Snyder, I think. He's really similar in the environment and culture building. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the Bedlam side of things, I mean, this isn't just exclusive to Brent Venables, this idea that it doesn't matter.
Mike Gundy.
Mike Gundy literally not long ago at some point today was basically gave out a written speech to the media at Oklahoma State that was like, hey guys, stop asking me about this. It's almost to the point where it's not news anymore. There was basically just a mutual understanding when OU decided to leave for the SEC that Bedlam was going to be impossible to schedule as an annual rivalry. And it's one of the most lopsided rivalries in college football anyway. So it's, and I get the sentiment from the people too that the nostalgia component, right? That is what's so great about college football, is that there are those rivalries like that. But, everything changes, and there will be new rivalries. I remember J.C. Watts expressing kind of the sentiment to me around the time of Bedlam last year that it's not going to be hard for OU to find enemies and people that it hates in the SEC.
Well, OU's going to go up against Missouri again. It's going to go up against Texas A&M again, Arkansas again. Those rivalries will be renewed. So.
Right, and Texas is going with them, and there's a real chance that they could develop some rivalry with Alabama or Georgia if they're all really kind of at the height of their game at the same time. So, I think we're to the point where it's with this Bedlam stuff, it's kind of this needs to kind of fade, and everybody needs to look toward the future because, I mean, it's it's inevitable. It's what's going to happen. You can't just rewrite it all of a sudden.
For sure. And I mean, both of them have that sort of kind of undermining the topic itself. And maybe that's coach speak with them just, putting up sort of a shield on their real opinions, given it being to the media. But guys, I mean, Joe Castiglione said in the reported statement that Brett McMurphy said that Oklahoma State hasn't shown much willingness to work with OU in terms of making maybe something what I would think like what Cyhawk is with Iowa State. They worked that out in a non-conference game.
Clemson, South Carolina.
Clemson, South Carolina, yes, something like that.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and those games have all worked out. It's not happening every year, but they're happening more often than not, and that could definitely be something that's kept going in the SEC, and it just seems like Oklahoma State, and it didn't go into it too much from Joe C's side, but really we're not necessarily sure what those two teams have worked together from an athletic department standpoint on what their willingness to really work with each other throughout this process has been.
Yeah, it's really odd. It seems like Oklahoma State is still kind of playing this like surprised victim type card, being kind of butthurt about this happening, and they aren't really willing to negotiate, but yet they're kind of putting up this front that's essentially kind of blaming OU and saying that OU's not the one coming to the table, but it kind of sounds like maybe they're the ones that aren't coming.
I would say, I mean, I would say it is kind of OU's fault because they were the one that dashed to the SEC, but at the same time, like Austin was just saying in that report, it was kind of Joe C, from what it seemed like, was kind of saying like OSU after the fact didn't really meet us in the middle and express any willingness to want to schedule it in the future. So, but like Mike Gundy was saying, we knew this was going to happen. This isn't really the newsiest thing today, so let's move on.
For sure, and I mean, with the nature of conference realignment, rivalry games like this are going to sort of fade, and new ones might be created later in the past. But looking forward, right, obviously OU's got Kansas State, 7 p.m. this Saturday. Should be under the lights again. Hopefully the athletic department and some of those guys upstairs have figured out how to use the lights a little bit better with the light shows. Had a few glitches last week or a few weeks ago, but ended up being pretty nice. But, I mean, what can we expect from this game after OU's huge win in Nebraska last week?
Well, first of all, with the lights, like they're working on it. Like talk to people in the athletic department about that stuff, and their sentiment is like, just wait. Like once OU gets to the SEC, that thing is really gonna go up. And yeah, there was a little glitches, but they'll build on that, and it'll be really interesting to see what that light show looks like when it's really like essentially dark at kickoff versus getting dark like halfway through the game, like it did with the Kent State game a couple weeks ago. But as for what we can actually expect in the context of that game, right? It's going to be interesting to see which Kansas State team we get, because Kansas State like dogged on Missouri and just like absolutely destroyed them.
Missouri's probably. Are we gonna act like we're gonna respect what Missouri is as a football program?
Yeah, I mean it's
May the force be with you.
Drinkwitz is an interesting.
They
guy.
might even be in a tier above Nebraska. That's still that speaks to bad on both.
It's the balance of they're an SEC team, but also they're a 2-win SEC team. Like they're garbage. So I don't know, but like that was still like a decent win, and their offense looked pretty good. And then last week they lose 17-10 to Tulane at home, and they just like can't put any points on the board. Adrian Martinez, who was at Nebraska last year, you faced him, is their quarterback. He has the worst QBR in college football, or one of the worst. It might be
bottom 5.
Yeah.
OU's had a weird quarterback inception the last 2 weeks. So obviously Casey Thompson was at Texas last year. He played for Nebraska. But Adrian Martinez came from Nebraska to Kansas State, so he's playing back-to-back quarterbacks they faced with different teams last year. And with the added transfer portal and even with conference realignment, that's sort of, I guess, a new similar thing that we might see. And then Kansas State lost to Michael Pratt, who OU also played last season. And Jeffrey Johnson came from Tulane. So we got a weird connection with all these two.
Everything's connected.
Everything is connected with all these teams. But, again, Kansas State looked really, really bad in that game, lost to a team they probably shouldn't have in Tulane. But props to Willie Fritz and the Fritz dog. That dude is awesome.
Yeah, Willie is the guy.
But, I mean, the biggest thing OU's going to have to prepare for, Deuce Vaughn. I mean, what do you guys, see in him as an opponent, and what OU can sort of go against him?
Yeah, shout out Willie Fritz, first of all. We were watching that game in the press box, and we were watching Kansas, Houston, and Kansas State, Tulane, and one of the Kansas schools pulled it out, but not the Wildcats. But anyway, yeah, number one's Deuce Vaughn when you think of Kansas State. I mean, he's the reason a lot of people were picking Kansas State to win the Big 12. Deuce Vaughn, we've seen. It seems like this is like his 6th year playing football. It seems like he won't go away, but just kind of like that.
He has 3 years left too.
Yeah, it's insane. But he's just kind of like that Darren Sproles type of back. He's just really shifty, really small. You know, he kind of disappears and then he's off to the races. But Brent Venables talked about it today. Ted Roof talked about it yesterday. Some of the players have been talking about it. All eyes are on Deuce Vaughn. So
I think what's fascinating, guys, is it's not so much Deuce Vaughn, the rusher, that's hurt OU the past couple years. It's Deuce Vaughn, the pass catcher.
yeah,
I believe over the past 2 matchups that they have, he's averaging 3.6 yards per carry, which is like essentially nothing.
yeah,
So they've shut him down in the run game. The problem is in both of these games, he's had over 100 receiving yards and picked up a touchdown receiving last year as well. And he doesn't need a lot of catches to do it either. Last year he had like 10 catches, but the year before he had over 100 yards on just 4 catches. And what did that come down to? We were actually just talking about it earlier today. But there was like one play where he just got behind the linebackers and like, boom, he's gone for 80 yards.
Yeah.
And then they go score a touchdown right after that. So that's the biggest thing is like, how can they figure out how to corral him in the passing game and make sure he has no space coming out of the backfield? And I think one of the things that may help in that is that 3-man front that they tried out last week against Nebraska, because you have the extra DBs on the field. You're maybe going to not give him as much space right on the other side of the line of scrimmage as you typically would to catch a pass. And so maybe that's something that OU can utilize to its advantage again this week.
Oh, we'll see. And I think it's been 2 of the main takeaways I think we've had from talking to players this week were Deshaun White talking about how Deuce Vaughn's size being so short is actually to his advantage with how he uses his body so well. But then Deshaun also talked about, like to your point about the 3-man front, OU's deployed a different scheme each week defensively, which I think has been interesting, just knowing that they see something that they want to attack as a defense from the other team in, the film and the studying in the week prior, and that's what they do. They work something against it. So last week, obviously, it was the 3-man front. They trotted out Damon Harmon as an extra safety, extra defensive back. That was part of the starting 11 out there. But it'll be interesting to see if they do something different. Obviously, Kansas State's done some interesting stuff offensively this year with Adrian Martinez. I showed them a play a few weeks ago where it's like a play-action pass where he actually takes off like he's doing like a quarterback power run, which has been a huge Kansas State staple play for so many years. But he actually steps back and hits like a little read option like throw. So they could do some really interesting stuff, and it'll be interesting to see how OU attacks that with their defense.
Brent Venables is the master of mixing these different coverages, and really it all started at K-State. When him and Bob Stoops and Mike Stoops and Jim Leavitt were all there on defense, they were expressly trying to be on the cutting edge of things. And so the way he's going to know how to defend this team.
yeah. And another thing about the Kansas State game, I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the Selman brothers statue is going up. They're unveiling that. Austin's working on a story on that this week. I think he's talked to a couple of the Selman brothers, Dewey. I think he's trying to get Lucius, but that's going to be really interesting, really long overdue, and that'll be really neat. What are you guys' thoughts on the Selman brothers statue?
It's just weird that it's happening now. I mean, Leroy, obviously, I talked to Dewey yesterday, and he's obviously an awesome person and just a great guy. And, their entire family is just known for being sort of that first family of OU football. And talking to Lucius tomorrow. Today is Tuesday when we're recording this, so I'm hoping to have that story out Thursday. And I'm excited to work on it, but it's just weird that these 3 brothers who are, known for being some of the best Oklahoma defensive players ever they played 45 years ago and they don't have a statue.
Yeah.
Leroy probably has an argument to be the greatest OU football player ever. Now he died in 2011, but he won't be here for the statue ceremony, but it's just it's weird that it's just now happening, but I guess better late than never.
We've got Zach Selman, who's is very high up in OU athletics as an assistant athletic director, and he's the son of one of the Selmans, Dewey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he kind of got the wheels moving on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he probably got in there and was like, we need a statue because long overdue. Like Austin was saying, they played 45 years ago. So yeah,
And they're gonna have family in attendance. And it's gonna
Barry's
be nice.
gonna be there.
Yeah, Barry's gonna be there. It's gonna be a big get together for them, but I know they're excited, and the university means a lot to them, and they've obviously given all they've had to it. So that'll be a nice thing to get to see. Sort of just a nice somber moment, being the first defensive players added to Oklahoma's Heisman Park, which is only Heisman. So being defensive players and that listed in that group is going to be special for them. That'll be at 3:30 prior to kickoff, a few hours before the Kansas State game starts.
Something I wonder about in that space now, will there be any sort of interest in changing the name of Heisman Park to something along the lines of OU Legends Park, and will they incorporate more former players into that space other than just Heisman's? Because I would venture to say that Ricky Dixon probably deserves a statue. They got
the John Blake one.
John Blake coming.
In the works.
That Brian Bosworth potentially deserves a statue. There's
so many guys that deserve a statue.
You
could go down the list. Adrian Peterson.
That's true. It's like how do you decide who gets that and stuff like that? But it's obvious that with adding the Selmans, there's a real genuine openness to looking at some different concepts there.
Off topic here, but if you could pick one player to have a statue in OU history, who do you think should deserve it?
I'm going Jocelyn Allo.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's not a football player, but no, Jocelyn 100% deserves one.
But
it
OU
sounds
football,
like she's about to get
OU
one.
football, probably the Boz or Adrian.
I would in terms of non-football, I would go Maggie Nichols. She's the Michael Jordan of NCAA gymnastics, and I think she'd be very deserving to have something like outside the Byerson Center or outside the Lloyd Noble Center or something like that. And the Jocelyn statue would be a great addition to Love's Field.
I think Jocelyn and Lauren Chamberlain should have statues.
I mean, if we're going a trifecta statue outside Love's Field that was like Patty, Jocelyn, and Lauren, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, and like you guys said, my off-football one would be Patty Gasso. We're getting a little on topic here, but for my OU football one, let's go with someone like Jack Mildren. I feel like he's the forgotten OU quarterback that's not labeled in that upper tier division, because you think of Kyler and Baker and Jason White and Josh Heupel, who all won Heisman's or not Josh Heupel. I don't know why I just said that, but
he probably honestly.
He was a finalist for it, but not sure why I just added him. My brain just died on that one, but. You think of Kyler and Baker and Bradford and Jason White as those upper tier elite guys, which they deservingly so. But I feel like Jack Mildren's one of those guys who won a ton of games and sometimes gets forgotten about. And he was really, at the time, one of the most dominant quarterbacks in Oklahoma history when he was playing.
Right. I'm not sure. Like you guys have said, there's just so many players that you could really get in the weeds on that. Mm-hmm. But I wonder about also the potential of coaching statues in the future, because Wilkinson already has a statue.
John Blake's is in the works.
Yeah. Who else gets? They already have they have Bob, they have other.
I think
people.
They're good on football. Coach statues. They just need to get to work on the Patty.
Right. Yeah, and maybe some other. At some point, do you look at like a Mark Williams or a Billy Tubbs or
Buddy Hield?
Yeah, what other? Yeah, so
you have a athletic center named the Blake Griffin Center,
but you don't have a Blake Griffin statue. Yeah. There's a lot that you could do, and the biggest thing is eventually you probably run out of real estate,
and those aren't cheap either.
Yeah.
They're $90,000 a pop. True. I think is what the Regents have said for some of those Heisman statues.
Yeah, you just have statues clumping up on each other in one area. Literally the Bob Stoops statue is on top of the Switzer statue or something like that. I don't know, but yeah.
But no, just to end it on that note, the Heisman's are obviously Heisman with such an illustrious award is so important to have, maybe statues for them. Looks like maybe we'll get the Kyler statue maybe in the spring, sort of similar to when we got the Baker one last spring. But I think it just really speaks to the Selmans and how much they accomplished for them to be, added to Heisman Park. And I think it's one of those things where they maybe just leave it at them and let them really speak to themselves and being how much they accomplished, knowing that they're involved with that. But we've talked a little bit about some of the coordinators we've talked to. Obviously, Coach Venables let's talk this week. We mentioned a little bit about what Deshaun White said. And we got to talk to Wanye Morris yesterday, who made his OU debut of the 2022 season last week against Nebraska in the third drive of the game after he dealt with an off-field issue. Early in the season, he missed the first 2 games. So what were some of the takeaways from what he was able to say and what he was able to do last week?
Yeah, I think there was one point where in the press box in Lincoln, I looked over at Austin. I was like, did you see that? He just pancaked the guy. So I thought that was the most consistent that the offensive line played throughout the whole season so far. And I think Wanye had was a big part in that. And McCade even said that tonight, just having Wanye back in the fold. Obviously, he's been practicing with them, but to have him in a game and have the whole group together, I thought they played really solid. Mason, what do you think?
In terms of the off season that group had, it didn't really surprise me that they quickly gelled. In fact, it seemed like the first 2 games they were kind of thrown for a loop because you had figuring in Tyler Guyton, you had moving Anton Harrison around a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they got Wanye back and they were able to just run with the defensive line that they ran with pretty much all fall camp, I think that did wonders for the offensive production.
Yeah, and I mean, while the offensive line looked great, they're obviously playing a unit that has no idea what it's doing right now. They just fired their defensive coordinator for how bad that defense has been all year. Got them looking like 2017 OU out there, or 2018 OU rather. That defense was even worse. But all jokes aside, I mean, the offensive line did look better. I think Wanye really adds to the depth in that room. And, I mean, clearly we were talking about it today, but he's the second most talented player on the entire roster when it comes to recruiting. Yeah. He was a 5-star before he transferred to OU from Tennessee, and he has a bunch of starts in the SEC. And he didn't play last season, even though he had so much experience with the Volunteers before. But I think he adds a lot and really solidifies that right tackle spot across from Anton. And I think that gives them a really solid 1-2 punch that, at its best, can rank among the top in the Big 12 and maybe even be one of the nation's better units if it can play to the ceiling that, the coaches and some of the media thought they can play.
Yeah, Nebraska's defense is horrible, like you said, but also they played UTEP at Kent State as well, and this was by far their best showing as a group.
Sure. Speaking of being at the top and not being a horrible defense, OU leads the nation in TFLs, and they're 4th in sacks.
Yeah.
It seems like Brent Venables is really, and I guess we shouldn't be that surprised that he did, but he's really elevated the timeline for this defense being good again. They're good right now.
This defense is really good.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this earlier in the week, guys, but we haven't heard much at all about Woody Washington, but that's something that's usually a good thing. When you're not hearing about corners that much, that's usually a pretty good thing. And it's Woody Washington. I mean, I'm speculating here, but he hasn't been tested very much this season, so he's obviously locking people up downfield, and what does good coverage go hand in hand with the pass rush, and so it's hard to sort of determine what sacks are from coverage sacks or what sacks are just Reggie Grimes blowing up a tackle, but those things have gone hand in hand, and I think they've been really working together. So I think the secondary's also played really well so far this year. All right, guys, so we've hit on a little bit of what the defense has been able to do 3 games into the season. Now that OU's starting its Big 12 play after its 3-game non-conference slate, undefeated so far, what are we sort of thinking about predictions for this week?
Yeah, I usually don't have my actual score prediction ready this time of night and this time of day, but I'm going to go with 35-14. And I think the reason being is I think Kansas State has some good pass rushers, and I think that their defense will, at least for maybe the first half, try to keep it competitive, and they'll put a little bit of points on the board against OU's defense, but I think there's a significant talent gap between these two teams and skill gap as well, and I just think that OU will take home the sizable victory in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go 38-10 OU. I, like Mason, don't really have my correct score, but I'm going to throw that one out there. I think Deuce Vaughn gets at least a touchdown. But I think this defense from Oklahoma just keeps rolling. I think they create turnovers, get some sacks, get some TFLs. They lead the nation in TFLs. So, yeah, I'm going to go 38-10 for now, but that might change by the time we post our predictions on Friday.
They were in a weird spot because, I mean, early on in the year, there was so much buzz about Kansas State and what maybe they were going to be able to do given some of their defensive additions and Deuce Vaughn being a bit older and getting Adrian Martinez. But, I mean, the Tulane loss has shook some things up. Kansas State's offense really hasn't looked very good through 3 games. So on that note, I think I'm going to go 34-10, pretty similar to what Colton's score is. I can't see this Kansas State offense that's been really struggling to get points on the board, especially with, even having some weapons there. I can't imagine them scoring too many points, especially on an OU offense that just shut out Nebraska, who's obviously done numbers with its offense this season. So I'm going to go with that. I think OU, like we talked about last week after the game, OU's offense and Jeff Lebby are starting to open up the playbook a little bit, and I think that can only bode well for their offense.
Yeah.
All right, so those are our predictions that we have for Kansas State. Let's shoot it over to Colin, our producer. He's got a question ready for us. Colin?
Okay, so I don't remember if this was actually during a real press conference, but I was watching Joel Klatt's show. But I was listening to his podcast, and he mentioned that Jeff Lebby had said that he had kind of been holding back those first 2 games, and that he was really just going to let loose from Nebraska. From what y'all have witnessed the past 3 games, did you see a shift at all from the first 2 games to the Nebraska game?
100% for me. I think it was really interesting talking to Marvin Mims after the game. I was asking him some questions about the offense and what they were really clicking against Nebraska, and he started talking about how in the spring they had 20 plays per day that they were doing in their offensive install for their playbook. So we know that they have a really deep bag that they can go to. It actually got prompted because of the Braden Willis touchdown throw on the trick play, and he said, someone asked him, I think, about how maybe you don't want to waste that for Nebraska, but he said we have so much in our bag that we're ready to let loose. So from my perspective, 100%.
Yeah, they were just definitely better. They did some different stuff. I don't remember them running a draw for Gabriel before that. They may have slid one in there or something, but it obviously didn't have that result. And I think kind of what you were saying, they towed the line between giving too much and opening up their book enough to show Nebraska some different stuff and to have a more potent offense. Like that trick play, yeah, it's a trick play, but it's also not that tricky. I mean, it's pretty simple what they did. So
yeah, everybody's going to point to that Braden Willis play, but honestly, that's some rookie-level stuff. Jeff Lebby has way more in the bag than that. But really the thing that stood out to me was after week 1 and after week 2, Jeff Lebby kept talking about we want to run the ball. We want to pass. We want to find some balance between the pass and the run, and I think they really did that against Nebraska. And Dylan Gabriel showed off that he's got some wheels too, so that's probably going to be a new thing in their offense as well.
For sure, and I can't even remember them doing a whole lot of tempo stuff. We know that's going to be Lebby's bread and butter that he wants to do, but it seemed like OU really wasn't doing a whole lot of tempo stuff, and I think that bodes well knowing that they can mix it up. I think it's interesting because there's also a play Mason pointed out. Chris Murray was in as a lead blocker before a penalty, and then Tawi Walker went into a fullback role in a goal line formation. And then there was also a time where Marvin Mims was lined up in the backfield, motioned off, and that was when he scored a touchdown, but it got called back. They were on about the half-yard line before I think Marcus Major maybe punched it in there. It might have been Eric Gray.
On the Murray play, I think Nebraska just burned a timeout, right? There wasn't a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, they saw a huge guy lined up back there, Savion Burton.
What is going on?
What is going on? But, yeah, I mean, those are 3 plays that stood out to me most, that they're really mixing it up. And I think it can only get more and more like that as the season goes on. And for sure, you're not going to see Lebby really opening it up to page 15 in the playbook, probably keeping it on page 1 or 2 against someone like UTEP.
And they tried the Gavin Freeman play again, but Davis fumbled the ball. But
yeah, that wasn't great. On the side of the tempo, I really feel like we haven't seen anything like what we saw in the first quarter against UTEP yet. They just haven't been going that fast yet again. Mm-hmm. And when they start doing that, they're going to cause some real trouble for people. And maybe this week is the week because of knowing what K-State can do in the pass rush, and they want to absolutely just wear that defensive line out and bend them until they break. Maybe it'll be an exciting week for offense in that space.
That's a good point. I think there's going to be a lot of passing downfield, trying to get the ball out quick. Maybe Dylan getting out of the pocket. But I definitely think there's going to be some tempo. I think they're going to score quick and jump up on K-State early.
All right, guys, those are our predictions. I think we're excited to have some more content for you guys coming out this week. I think it's going to be an interesting game. We have the Selman statue, like we've talked about. Brent Venables coming up against his alma mater. And we're seeing an OU team that's starting to play pretty well. And Brent Venables has got, the program in a spot where maybe we didn't think they would be a few weeks ago. Number 6 in the country right now. They might end up being, they're really in a spot to contend for maybe a playoff in year one, given the turnover, which no one really would have predicted 9-10 months ago. So anyway, guys, just thanks for joining us here on Goal Oriented, Season 2, Episode 3. Check out OUDaily.com for some of our stories later in the week and after the game, and our Twitter spaces that we do every game, so after every game to recap. So guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace out.